Meet Grayson Cross.
We can always improve, and how you do anything is how you do everything.
He's a managing partner at a top digital marketing agency.
Very quickly, that actually came to results where I started there as like a social media manager, basically.
And is a growth partner and investor focused on working across the e-commerce landscape.
Then I started building other people's websites, and then I was like, okay, I need to go get some actual big time experience.
Join us as we discuss his approach to brand building and scaling revenue.
For a while there, I was incredibly satisfied, and I was like, well, how do I start making millions and millions of dollars?
Why his focus is currently on subscription models.
I'm personally focused on is subscription and subscription brands, because it makes your life way easier and makes your business have a way higher valuation.
And why he thinks every business in the e-commerce space should be paying attention.
And if you want your business to survive, you have to be paying attention if you're in the marketing world, because it will not survive.
What he looks for in a brand before making an investment.
There's some other small investments that I'm putting towards just mostly on the people aspect.
And how he's able to remain sharp, focused, and effective as a busy entrepreneur working across multiple projects.
I would say that if you want to be the most successful, it's to focus on one thing exclusively, period. If you want that one thing to be the most successful.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Grayson, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Jordan, the honor is mine. I am so excited to be here. What a great conversation we had even before we started today. I'm really stoked about it.
For sure. And I'm actually going to start this one slightly differently to normal, because with you, I want to talk about some kind of lifestyle and balance points before we get into the business stuff. So can you just, and I know you kind of split your time between 3 locations. Can you just explain to me and to the audience why that is?
Yeah, I would love to, man. It's definitely weird, you like myself, we're in this e-commerce ecosystem of business, and it's I spend my time between California and New York, but I also live in Idaho. And that's usually the outlier for most people. A lot of people we hear about the Charleston bubble, where there's a lot of e-commerce in Charleston, South Carolina, North Carolina lately. But Idaho is the place to, I would say, get as much done as humanly possible. New York City, there's the most capital, the most business going on in the entire world. California, that's where our office is in Sacramento, where we got a 40,000 square foot studio where we shoot all of our creative. And Idaho, there's absolutely nothing going on. There's no parties, there's no girls, there's no distractions, there's absolutely nothing. But I do have some family here. And what I've found is to have that balance of being able to spend 2 to 3 weeks of time per location. A month where I start to max out is where I start to get that, hey, New York energizes me like crazy. An office there is the most, also where the most tech startups I would say are, especially in the finance world. I spend a lot of time with the Skio guys over there. I'll talk about that in a second. And then California is it's definitely a culture thing. It's a little bit more artistic, artsy, I'd say, in California than it is New York, depending if we're in high fashion or if we're in Silicon Valley startup type mode. And then Idaho, there's nothing going on. I see each area is a different focus of the work, where, we'll talk about the lifestyle in a second, but the work of myself is to try to balance it and actually be as productive as possible and not get caught up in the crazy grind that everyone else seems to find themselves in,
Okay. And am I correct in kind of extrapolating from what you said, that you spend a few weeks in each place and then just kind of keep going?
That's pretty spot on. So I'm in Idaho right now. I've been here for, I think, 3 weeks now. And then I'm going to be back in New York next week. I'll be there for another 3 to 4 weeks. And then from there, I'll probably go back down to California. And then after that, I'm in Europe for a month or 2. But that doesn't count. It's an out of the picture.
So how far in advance are you planning this? When are the flights booked up to?
That's a good question. I'm not a planner in every part of my life when it comes to business, except when it comes to travel, right? I'll be hey, probably a week from now. I think when I start to get itchy, my antsy, it's time to go. But usually I know I got 3 to 4 weeks, I say, is the planning in advance. I'm all right, in about a month, I'm going to go here. In a month, I'm going to go here. But it's pretty loose, I'd say, it's definitely pretty loose.
So you're just going almost based on kind of gut feel to a certain extent.
You start to build up. It's so funny. You start to build up the people you need to go see. We live in this total remote place, and I love old school sales tactics, but I also love old school relationship building. So when I get my list gets to like, all right, I got like 7, 8 people I got to go see. It's time to go back to California. It's time to go to New York. It's time to go even to Spokane and go see these people and be like, hey, let's actually meet in person. Let's go grab a drink after work. Let's go talk about it and get a little bit understanding of the business. Because there's so much more power than saying, oh, let's hop on a Zoom and review a deck versus like, hey, let's go grab a coffee. Let's go on a walk. It's just a very, very different, different experience.
How does your kind of day-to-day or schedule change between those places, if it does?
Wow, yeah. So that's the planning aspect coming in. I schedule my day in like 15-minute increments from 5 a.m. to like 10 p.m. every day. I'm like completely booked, which is something I've talked about before. I'm a big user of AI. So I wake up in the morning, I do a self video journal, which is like mind dumping. Like, this is what I got to do today. Here's everything I missed. I've gotten really into the AI wearables. So I'm wearing something 24/7 that records all my conversations. And then beginning of my day, it all feeds into a GPT overwrap and comes out and says, this is what you're supposed to do all day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, which for some people sounds really terrifying. But for me, it's very, very enlightening because you lose the most productivity when you're switching or trying to figure out what you're supposed to do via decision fatigue. New York versus California, it's only a 3-hour difference. So it's like, if I'm already waking up at 5 a.m. and going to bed around 10 o'clock, it doesn't really make a difference because most people in New York are starting their day around 8 or 9, and most people in California are starting their day around like 6 or 7. So it's got like the best of both worlds.
And then when you're in Idaho, are you kind of, I don't know what I picture here, like maybe you going hiking 24/7, or are you still kind of locked in and working a lot?
Oh my gosh, I do. So you're actually not too far off. I love outdoors, man. Like, before we got on the call, I wish the listeners could have heard this. We were talking about the Greeks, and I've been reading and listening to a lot of Marcus Aurelius lately, and he talks about how with people like our technology, what we do is very relatively new to human civilization, but even he would talk about the great number workers, as they would describe it, the people who use their brain 24/7 strategists. They would find the most calming by doing physical activity. So I actually bought a couple of investment properties around here. And one of my most favorite activities is to get outside and go do physical labor. Even though it's incredibly cost prohibitive, it would make way more sense just to hire people to do this stuff on this. But there's something so primal and calming about taking down a wall, putting a new wall up. It's very calming, I'd say.
I want to pivot slightly. So you mentioned kind of some AI wearables and kind of how you're using it to dictate your schedule. Can you just talk through kind of that in more detail, and then where else you're kind of using AI in your personal, so kind of non, work or advertising life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a abusive relationship with GPT at this point. I just say what I need 24/7 and they go for it. Yeah, so AI wearables, this is not product placement, but I will give my favorite one. This is a little pin called Limitless AI.
Okay.
I pre-ordered this thing like 3 years ago, and it's probably one of my favorite products. It is just an AI wearable. It's a clip. It goes on any part of you, and it records everything you do pretty much 24/7 with speaker identification. And then it feeds the entire transcript wherever you want. I have it via going an API into my Notion. But what's nice about it is it does speaker identification, which is like my favorite piece of it. It can say, hey, I can go to my huge journal inside of GPT and say, who was it that I was talking to 3 weeks ago about this project, and what was the outcome of the discussion? It'll come to me and it'll say, hey, 3 weeks ago you were supposed to talk to John about this, and this was the outcome. You were supposed to send an email. I added this as a task to your to-do list tomorrow. And that's kind of the extent which I'm at now, which is like pretty much every conversation I have, everything I do. I even have overlays on my screen that basically records everything I do. So at the end of each day, I'll get a summary on what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, and then how to really make the next day the most productive. At the end of the day, like without overcomplicating it, it's a really, really simple to-do list for me with a very complicated back end. So for me, it's just log on. Here's everything I got to do. This order, this order, this order. And then for the back end is where all the magic, so to speak, happens.
Do you have kind of like an encyclopedia or like a journal of your knowledge base, which is in the back end, and that's where the kind of day recordings feed into?
Yeah, absolutely. The knowledge, like, sometimes I'll just put stuff in there that I just want to research later, right? But I think the second brain, which is becoming a very popular terminology in, I'll call it the high productivity world, is it just eliminates decision fatigue, which I think is hard. There's a lot of studies trying to remember what it was. I think it was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which talked about how judges right after noon will give the lightest sentences on inmates because they just had lunch, right? And they just are the best, in the best mood. And it's because it takes a lot of mental effort to make decisions of not only how to do something, but what to do. So I've just taken as much presence as I can to remove as much of the decisions and then just focus on the actions. And the decision is now basically a formula in a spreadsheet that says, if this, then do this, without having the emotional component, which is really taxing for us as humans. And that's like the knowledge base of what to do,
For a layman like myself, does that mean you've kind of aligned AI with your life goals and what you want to achieve? And then on
Yes.
a daily basis, you're like, I have this thing that I need to do, or this option. Can you make a decision based on this framework?
You're 100% spot on. Yearly goals, quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals, and it's just broken down into that. I think where you start to run into some weird things is things that you wouldn't even think about. Should I go get coffee, or where should I go to lunch with this guy? With meeting with someone, where should I go to lunch? My formula is wherever's closest. Not even think about it. Wherever is close, it doesn't even matter. But for many people, they may take 10, 15 minutes to decide, well, I wonder if that's something they'd like. Should I ask them where they would prefer, versus just the 15-minute, here are the two options. They're both within this distance. Which one do you want to go to? And
Okay.
like if you're having a lunch with a business partner, that's a great example of how to take even a small decision fatigue that would say, it's only 5 minutes, 10 minutes to make a decision, but now you've reduced it to seconds, which adds up rather quickly.
Sure. Just a question on this. Well, a couple of questions actually. So you said you're wearing this kind of clip on all day. Do you have kind of like a business CRM that's kind of up to date of, when you spoke to this person, this is the conversation you had, and then the reminders from that and the action items as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I like about speaker identification, right? So whenever I start a conversation, like I even did it with you, like I say, "Hey, nice to see XYZ," right? And then that's a pickup for it to say, "Oh, I'm going to associate this voice with this person now." And it's during this time slot because now it's connected to this time slot in my calendar. So I can say, "At this time, you spoke to this person about these things." And then the action items will automatically come out of it. And yeah, it feeds into a CRM tied to you, right? So now I've got it like a dossier of Jordan, right? Here's everything Jordan and I have ever talked about. And I think like when I first started doing this, I have a lot of semi-intimate conversations. So I was like, I wonder how the privacy is on this stuff. So I keep everything on like a local model because I've always been afraid of somebody getting my dirty laundry, which is far and few in between, but I don't want them to know what my favorite superhero is, So yeah, I've been very security conscious to keep everything on a local model, but unless it's running through running through like a Zap for summaries and stuff like that.
So you mentioned there kind of some aspect of personal conversations. A friend of mine said that he kind of uploaded transcripts of his therapy sessions and like a backstory to his life, and then was kind of asking the GPT questions on kind of like if there was a day-to-day issue. Is that something like, would you go into that kind of angle with this, or are you using it solely for kind of business stuff?
I think that it's like one and the same at this point. We talk about business. You and I, and probably a lot of people listening to this, I would consider, high performers / workaholics is the actual way of representing it. And you find the most peace in your life when you have a good works, not schedule, but fulfillment level. I know people who work 4 hours a day that are the most stressed out I've ever seen in my entire life. And I know people who work 12 hours a day who are like living in a Zen garden, And what I've found myself doing, that's the decision fatigue thing that I personally developed that because that was something I struggled with that I found from business coaching, which if you have a business coach, just so you know, that's big kid therapy. It's like a better way of saying it's work therapy. That's what a business coach is. And he went and told me, he's like, this is what you struggle with. It struggles with making a decision quickly because I like things to be perfect. I'm a perfectionist. I want it to I use the making lunch as an example. I used to go deep on this. This is like, I would stalk people to say, what's their favorite coffee shop? I go through their, before I had a call with them, I'd go through their Instagram, go find where they would frequent and say, hey, we should meet here for coffee. Because I knew that this was a place that they'd really like. And that's like a great way of doing something. And it was a good way of research. But what I really realized is like, hey, that's an awesome thing, but I can either outsource that or I can just not do it. And the effect is going to be 99% of the change with 30 minutes of research versus 30 seconds of just doing it, So yeah, from a personal aspect, your outside of work life is going to be defined by the weakest link in the chain. And if your work life sucks, you're stressed about something, your personal life is going to suck and you're going to be stressed there.
So you're not drawing a line and you're kind of using these tools across all aspects.
I think so. I would say absolutely. We can always improve, and how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're late to meetings, you're probably late to dates too.
Okay. Next question is, and I just want to kind of round this off now before we spend the whole time talking about this. How do you stay on top of the kind of latest news, trends, and tools in the kind of AI space? And yeah, what are your top tools? You mentioned Limitless there. Could you give me maybe a top 3 to 5 that you're kind of working with?
Yeah. So I think like one, GPT is like number one, right? Like let me break this into two questions. How do I stay on top of it? I'm super active on LinkedIn, and I want my business to survive. Those are the two ways. And if you want your business to survive, you have to be paying attention if you're in the marketing world, because it will not survive. If you're in construction, you're in like, more of a, I'd call it a physical labor position, you'll probably be fine. But I know people who are in real estate and construction who are printing cash. I met somebody the other day, he's a 24-year-old, and he's doing circles around multi-million-dollar companies just by integrating GPT agents in his real estate company. It's insane. But me personally, GPT is number one. Use it for probably everything, whether it be direct integration or using like Zapier through it. Number two, from the Wearables, I use Limitless. Like I said, 24/7. It's amazing. And Limitless actually has another company called Rewind, and I would say everybody go look at Rewind too. Again, not product placement, not endorsed, but it's a really cool service. What Rewind essentially does is it records your computer screen 24/7, same thing as Limitless via audio, except it allows a rewind feature. So if you hold shift and scroll up with your mouse wheel or your trackpad, it just starts rewinding your screen. So you can say, oh, what was that page I just closed? And then you can just rewind the screen, or you can pull up a search bar and search it. And then the last one, which I think is becoming more and more in use, is Make. If anyone's heard of Make, it's like Zapier. But it just allows you to do a lot of connectedness between different platforms to automate everything. The first role that we hired, like I would say this year and at the end of last year, was automation specialists. I call it AI prompt automation specialists, where we would have them sit in on meetings of creative team, of ad buying team, and say, hey, great, how do you do this? How do you make this 100% automated? And not for the feature most people are like, is like to remove talent, but actually to increase capacity so that same talent could do 5 or 10 times as much stuff. Starting with, and went to everyone, what is the thing that you hate doing the most? Right? What is the thing you hate doing the most? Because you don't want employees to get terrified that like AI is going to come take their job. You want them to get super excited about it. So what is the thing you hate the most? And then we had our AI prompt engineers be able to come in and start doing that stuff specific, which was like the filling out reports, the moving data from sheet 1 to sheet 2, the summarization, all the stuff that is perfect for, a simple automation.
I want to go back to kind of the personal life now before we start
Okay.
talking about work stuff. So I know when we spoke previously, you said your definition of success had changed recently. Can you just talk me through that, what it was before and what it is now?
Yeah, is it okay if I get a little heavy? I know this is kind of a lighter podcast,
Please
but I want to
do.
get like
Please
a
do.
little heavy. I think all entrepreneurs that are going like this in their career and their life, and then for those who are listening, that's an upward straight potential, hit something that happens, whether you get sued, whether like something happens or like whatever that might be. For me, I had a super close death in my family. It was very abrupt. And I'd never have a close family member die until last year. And then I really didn't. I actually got the news like in the middle of a meeting. It was super weird. Got the news in the middle of a meeting, and I remember it was like everyone has that moment like the world goes like super quiet. And I put my phone down and I continued presenting in the meeting, which was like a very, very weird thing for me because I just didn't know how to process it. Right. Continue the meeting. Day went on, got home, and then just like fell apart. Right. And then, I kind of swallowed it and just went back to life, didn't really process it. Because, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're a younger entrepreneur, go to therapy. No matter what, go to therapy. You need it. Continued going. And I found myself actually not processing and working harder and working harder until about November of last year. Until I actually suffered like a partial stroke, which was a very weird thing that happened to me. I didn't realize it at the time because I thought I was on Adderall, I was on like 20 Red Bulls, I was on a ton of caffeine, 4 pots of coffee a day, the classic young, ambitious, I'm completely bulletproof, my health can never change type entrepreneur story. Until, the left side of my body basically just stopped functioning. And I was like, this is, what's going on here. So I went to the emergency room, went through all of that. And the summary was I had to get off of all stimulants and then just take it really slow for a couple months. And that really forced me to realize is I'm evolving from the young entrepreneur that is completely unstoppable to it's like you reach that getting closer to middle age that it's like, you can't do the shit you used to do. And a lot of entrepreneurs talk about like when you have the time, the energy, and the effort to be able to do it, you should work as much as you humanly can because your earning potential is basically uncapped and use it now while you can. But you also have to know that there is just like for real limit to that. So you and I had another conversation about what success looks like to me. And I came from I'd say very modest background. I had 8 siblings. My family was not well off by any stretch of the imagination. We definitely had some months where the cupboards were empty when I was younger. But my parents were amazing. If my parents ever listen to this, you're the best people ever. So I've achieved, I bought my first house when I was 20 years old. I achieved more than I ever thought I would ever achieve. And I reached that point. I'm like, okay, where do I stop? Right? Like, when do you actually stop and like appreciate it? And now this year is the first year that I actually set goals, not just fiscally, not just career, but also towards my health. And my definition of success has changed a lot. Where I used to look at people like, who had this whole family, had the kids' life and all that. I'm like, oh, I can't believe people would do that. And now I look at it and I talk to every one of my friends who has children, who has this life, and like, it's the best thing I've ever done. And I come up with the counter arguments that are like, well, doesn't that slow down your life? How do you function with a career? You can't just jump on a plane, go to the other side of the country, go see a manufacturer. And they're like, yeah, but like, does that really matter that much? And I'm like, well, yes, but I've shifted a lot on this to focus on what actually is the pursuit of happiness, because I always found so much pleasure in not the end result, but actually the running and the attacking it and the solving the problems and getting closer. And as I've grown my career and grown myself, and I've, my limit of worries, because I don't worry about paying, the bill every month now, these worries have gotten so small that now I'm like, okay, well, am I in love with the process, or am I in love with seeing the number and, the spreadsheet get 1 digit bigger every month, and that's what's changed a lot for me. That was a really long answer. I'm sorry for getting a little heavy on that, but, want to get real with it.
Very powerful. So just to kind of double tap on that, has the drive for kind of financial success or business success, has that lessened, or have you just kind of balanced it more with other goals?
I think it's interesting to answer that question. When we talk about what we do, and I bring it back to like the Greeks with building like construction, for instance, when do like, and I come from my family was in construction, that a house is done when the roof is on, it's painted, and it's perfect, right? When you're talking about your personal business or like even a client's business, a lot of us are in the client services business. I'd say we have clients of our own. That's how we operate. Even if you hit the target, there's like still more. Like I could be 10% over target. I could be 20% over target. There is no clear end goal, and there will never be. And that was like the hardest thing for me to cope with. And after doing that for, 10 years of there not being a end number that you can actually hit, I needed to realize that there's got to be a good enough moment. Like there's got to be a actual good enough moment where it's like, if you hit 120% for one of your brands, you should be jumping over the moon, but also being like, okay, let's take a breath and not keep trying to go even harder and harder and harder, unless that's like, let's say have the time, energy, and effort to do it. And that's just not for brands, but for yourself, for your personal life, for whatever that means. So I would say that the drive, the goals are still there. They're still super big and huge. But what I'm trying to not do as much is I would take calls at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, because it's like, okay, that's when you can hop on with a manufacturer in China. Like that's just when you do it. That's when it was possible. That's how overseas works a lot. And for me, it was no big deal. And now I'm trying to keep a really strict, like 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So it's more of just understanding of when you're, where you're putting the bars and whiskers on the personal time versus the non-personal time, and what that actually, what that looks like. So the drive is still there, but the satisfaction of actually being able to be grateful for it is like the better way of saying it. Because most entrepreneurs, if you're listening to this, If you've got a business, you're not crazy in debt, let's say 5K more, you are now richer than the 1% of the entire world, and you are probably better off than the 1% of the 1% of the entire world. So we got to be grateful about that, you know?
Okay. So just to kind of clarify what you're saying, so you kind of got the separation and the guardrails in place for your like day-to-day working life, and you're trying to be more grateful about the success. Is that
I would
correct?
100 without a shadow of doubt. Yeah. The mental energy that requires, we even start our conversation with this.
Yeah.
The mental energy and outlook when you are just unbelievable, just grateful for there to be breath in your lungs in the morning is very different than when you log on, you say, oh my God, my CAC is $1 above where it should be. You know what I mean? Like very different things to focus on. That's what I would say. But yeah, I agree with that.
And then how outside of work then have you tried to achieve more of a balance, or what kind of other pillars of life are you now looking at more actively?
That's family. That's a huge one. We talk a little bit about Idaho. I make Sunday one of like the non-negotiables for me. Go see my
That's
family
not a 5
every.
a.m. to 10 p.m. workday.
Well, I'm still up at 5, but I'm just going to the gym, going on a run, going. That's the health day, right? And then, yeah, the family is like a huge piece of it. The leisure activities, whatever that looks like, the leisure activities that are non-digital, anything that is non-digital, something where it's like I'm not looking at that email, I'm not looking at that phone, whatever it is. It's like this is one of my favorite sayings that I'm really getting better at practicing. Is it can wait. There are very, very few things in the entire world that if you don't respond right now, because I was like a respond the moment you get it type of guy, it can wait. It can wait till the next day. It can wait till an hour from now. It can wait. If you're out to dinner with a significant other, you can take that call the next morning. I promise you that it will be all right.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you, it's kind of family, health, work. Anything
Yeah.
I'm missing there?
No, you're spot on, brother. You're
Okay.
spot on.
And then I guess kind of, I know you do a lot of kind of reading, as you said, and learning, I guess, in general with kind of the AI stuff that you've talked about. How do you fit that in? And is that kind of part of the work segment? And what kind of categories are you looking at for learning?
So for the work segment, like the AI side, help me understand that a little bit better. I want to make sure I give you the right answer.
Yeah, because you mentioned, reading about the Greeks and philosophy and stuff like that, and then obviously you're staying up to date on tech and kind of AI. So I'm just general question: where are you looking for learning, and is it just work related, or is it about the other aspects of life?
Yeah, I think that we talked about it you talked about one of your friends, like taking his therapy sessions. I'll do that with like specific people, right? I think Limitless, like one of their first prompts, it's so funny that they grave you with, is they've got like a prompt library and it's geared towards career, right? And then they've got a whole section at the bottom that's like geared towards personal, which is like, how could I have been a better mother today? How could I have been a better friend today? Because it's got all the conversations, it's got all that. It's like, how could you have been a better XYZ? And me personally, I've analyzed my own habits I was completely unaware of, right? And one of the ones is like little things you wouldn't think of is like, the way you open or end conversations. And I analyze my own habits, the way I talk to people, and from a learning perspective, that's one. And then for like a knowledge of the learning side is I ask every time I have a conversation with someone, more often than not, I'll end it with like, hey, thanks so much for talking. Do you have any book recommendations to me if they've never given me any, right? What are some things that you think that you thought about as we talked? And more often than not, there's like, I don't want to say it's binary. There's people who do read books and there's people who don't read books, but it actually is. It's one of the few things in life that if you don't read books, the average American reads 1.5 books in their whole life. And one of those 1.5 books is usually a religious text. So they read like 0.5 books. Where if you read books, your average is closer to like the 10 to 20 mark, which is a big difference. So I usually ask people, is like, well, what do you think is something I could learn about that would be relevant? And one thing I'm trying, back to the leisure time, I'm trying to not automate reading because probably it would be more efficient. I find a lot of pleasure in reading. It's something that makes me really happy.
Interesting. Talking or kind of extrapolating on that point of mentors, I guess, and learning, has there been anyone that's kind of stood out to you? And that can be, author, someone in your career, or anyone that's kind of helped you develop
Yeah, I read a lot
a
of
lot.
books this year. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm actually going to really pull up in my reading list real quick because I can tell you a couple of them that really jumped out to me. I mean, from the career side, I think Malcolm Gladwell is an amazing author. If you want to learn a lot very quickly about very specific things, I'd say Malcolm Gladwell is really useful to help you start analyzing trends a lot better. And then it goes back to like the Greeks, like Marcus Aurelius. Like these are some of the books that I probably spent way too much time on. And then we get towards like the getting things done mentality. So there's like the how to analyze, then there's the how to think, you know, in the positive mindset. And then we talk about like David Allen. David Allen's a really good author. He wrote Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. It's one of my favorite things. It just talks about like how to do things in the right direction. But those are some of the authors I probably follow the most. There's an author that was so funny back when I was at Common Thread Collective with Taylor Holiday. It was part of the employee onboarding process that people had to read this book called The Upside of Stress. And it was really interesting. It was by Kelly. Oh my gosh, what is her name? Kelly McGonigal. And what it talked about in this book was that when you get stressed, it is a biological response to make you perform better. The fight or flight was designed to make you literally fight or flight, right? Either defeat the problem ahead of you or run away because the problem is too big. And we can just take the mentality that there's probably no problem that's too big for us to get rid of. And we can take that fight mentality and just reframe it instantly and say, okay, I now have higher blood pressure. I now alert because I am going to solve this problem. And just reframing that mentally was a huge change. And like Taylor Holiday probably is like the best book recommendations in the world. If you haven't had him on, you totally have to. And I get his ones, but I would say that.
That is a hell of a book for an onboarding.
Agency life. He's like, it's going to be hard. Get ready. You know?
Honestly, right? But yeah, I bet some people kind of read that or see the cover and they run.
I would imagine so, because they open up with the TED Talk version of it, and then they give everyone the book in that order. You know?
Softens the blow.
Sure.
Let's kind of dig into the work side of things then. So I guess, yeah, can you just talk through the background of your career, where you're at today? And I know you've got a few other bits going on outside of kind of the day job, as it were. So just at a high level, cover that as well.
I would say I'm a serial entrepreneur, unfortunately. You know, if you're listening to this and you're a serial entrepreneur, there is a mental health helpline for you. You know, I started my first, if we want to go way back in the beginning, you know, my first job was, I think I was like 14 and a half years old. I opened a bouncy castle rental business where I cut lawns until I had enough dollars to buy a bouncy castle, an inflatable off of Craigslist at the time. I don't even know if Craigslist is still around. I think it is. But I got it for like $400. And I was like a little kid here. And I remember going in all these Facebook groups for all the local churches and all this stuff and say, hey, I'll rent a bouncy castle, $100 a day, which was like a steal at the time. It was like such a steal for people. And I remember I would like load it up on the back of my bike with a little trailer and go to these people's houses that were just local, you know, in town. Wow. And it was so funny. And I remember I'd be like, are you licensed and bonded and insured? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, you know, absolutely not. I'm not paying.
Is it not illegal to be kind of lugging that around and blowing it up and letting people?
I'm sure it was, you know, but I mean, like, that was like an ask for forgiveness, not permission thing. Where I'm like 14, 15 years old. If somebody has a problem, like, I don't know, I didn't know, you know what I mean? From there is where I realized like the success of the digital piece, because what I found is I started hiring like my cousins and stuff like that to like go set it up. Because I'm like, wow, I could just go on, you know, Facebook Marketplace. Well, at the time it was just Facebook groups and Craigslist and list this thing. And that's when I think I had the first realization how powerful like the internet truly was, where it's like you can just have people show up and you don't even have to do anything. And then I kind of got into like some of the early drop shipping stuff. When I was 16, 17, I had a couple of apparel companies. Obviously, they were all just like, it's nothing crazy big, but they were big enough to get me some deals in the door. Then I started building other people's websites, and then I was like, okay, I need to go get some like actual big time experience. And this was probably a right place, right time type of situation. But a local entrepreneur bought an abandoned mall and turned it into manufacturing and had the dream of building this huge gun company. And I came on as like, you know, a social media person, like when I was, I think 18 years old, 19 years old. And I made him the promise. I'm like, I'm going to make this like the biggest gun company and the gun accessories company in the world. Very quickly, that actually came to results where I started there as like a social media like manager basically, and I left as basically the head of digital, where we scaled that thing. You know, I can't get super specific, but it was in the neighborhood of $1 million a week in revenue, which at the time made it one of the largest firearm accessory companies in the world. And that's where I got the real experience. I was like, okay, it's time to upgrade and start going to these big dogs. And that's where I met Taylor Holiday. And I went and worked for him over at Common Thread Collective. And Taylor, if you ever listen to this, you're probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. So grateful for your mentorship, so grateful for your time, energy, and effort. And Taylor is really the one who put me through, I call it CEO training, CEO boot camp, and pushed me to be way more than I ever believed. He put me on let me work on some massive businesses. This is where I got like the P&G type of native work, the type of large scale companies like Fortune 500. And for a while there, I was incredibly satisfied. And I was like, well, how do I start making millions and millions of dollars? I was something called a growth guide over there, which is basically, pod leader. You're the one who controls all of the levers of what happens for a business. And then I met my partner, Tommy Patterson, Kyle Hunt, and at the time, Brandon Fink. And I said, what are you guys doing? And they had this vision of Weekend Digital and Weekend Investments, which was basically go find assets, buy them, and scale them. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3-4 years. So I'm invested in many assets of my own now, many assets there to be able to scale them up from a digital sense. Because the levers and how it goes, where if you look at a business, you say this thing has wheels, because you can look at the spreadsheet and say this is going to work. Then it's a lot easier to go in and work with a founder and acquire a minority portion of the business and then scale it up. So that's been the mission. But during this time, I've also, I don't want to say I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I've spent a lot of time having hundreds of conversations. So now I'm invested in my own real estate, commercial real estate developments. I talked a little bit about that. There's some other small investments that I'm putting towards just mostly on the people aspect. I found the greatest thing is to be able to mentor people in exchange for, both a retainer, but also on percentages of their companies. Because when you've done this a dozen times, you know exactly the formulas, what to do. Just presenting people with the correct tools and teaching them is, could be $1 million value to them. So that's kind of a short and wide version of it. But mostly it's moving towards, I spent a lot of time, I was, recently with Aiden, who's the CEO of Skio in New York a couple of weeks ago. Most of the stuff I'm personally focused on is subscription and subscription brands, because it is unbelievably the only thing I want to do in e-commerce moving forward. Like that is the only thing. It needs to have some component of subscription to it, because it makes your life way easier and makes your business have a way higher valuation.
For sure. I will come back to that, and I want to talk about kind of your work at Weekend as well.
Yeah,
Can you just
absolutely.
talk to kind of how you balance running or being involved in multiple different projects in very different fields, right?
I would say it definitely helps I don't have kids. I would say that. It definitely helps I don't have kids, and hashtag recovering workaholic. I'm a managing partner at Weekend and Weekend Investments. It's definitely been a big growth journey. I've been forced to get hyper efficient. I've been forced to learn how to delegate. I know that and this was probably like the most painful experience of my entire life, as being, I would say I am a control freak, learning how to not do that, where I've had to see people fail multiple times. This comes with anyone who owns a business, to see employees struggle and having to not do it for them and have to guide them through how to do it. And then the long-term rewarding side is I have some people on my team which are total freaking killers now, absolute killers. When I met them, they were not, they were less than, but they had the drive and the want to be. I talked about one of my employees who literally would not stop showing up on the office. He would be like, I'll do anything to work here. I'll mop your floors. I'll get you coffees. I'll do literally anything to work here. I'll even work for free for like a quarter. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the kind of drive that you want in someone. And he's went off now, and I've helped him with this project, went off to open his own company, doing pretty successful, very proud of him. And he's one of those killers. So I would say that the way that I balance it is I've been forced to, from a time and energy standpoint. But this is why I schedule my days to like 15, 10-minute increments at the max, because I want to be able to dedicate at least this much time to each thing I'm focused on.
I want to come back to that question, but then I want to kind of dig into what you said there about like stepping back, letting people kind of fail, coach them through it, and become a better version of them. How do you decide if that person is the right person to be coached almost? How many kind of like mistakes do you let them make? Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, because there's been some that I was so certain about and I was completely wrong. And I think anyone who's listening to this, who has team, who has staff, has probably felt the same way. That you're like, oh, I can do it. I can get them there. It's like, dating. It's like, I can fix them.
Where do you draw that line?
I think when they repeat the same mistake. I think that that's like, I had an amazing teacher, Grant Sanini, if you ever listen to this. Also, Trent Kurth, who was awesome. Caitlin, if you're listening to this, one of my favorite sayings is, I don't care if I do care if you make a mistake, especially if it's stupid, but I'm not going to be mad at you if you make a mistake. I'm going to be mad at you if you make the same mistake twice. And I think that that's when everyone, I don't want to say gets a freebie unless it's like super obvious, like the typo or some shit like that. But like everyone makes a mistake and it just happens. This goes back to modeling a business. When I talk to people, I just don't expect to churn anyone. You're going to churn employees. You're going to churn brands. You're going to churn. It's going to happen whether you have the best business in the world or the worst business in the world. It's going to happen. And people will make mistakes. I personally make mistakes all the time. The ones I make are very minor and it's good mistakes to happen, but they happen. So the point in which you try to say this is time to go is one, the way that they receive feedback, the way that they improve, and how and whether they make the same mistake twice. And then I think that's the way that they own up to it. I think that when we have a conversation with someone and they get defensive about it versus coming in and saying, there was something we had back at Common Thread, which was palms up, like, hey, I want to help. Coming and say, I messed up. This is what I did wrong. I want to do this to fix it in the future. Help me work on this. That's one thing versus any kind of, I don't want to say argumentative, but not ownership of the problem.
Makes sense. And then kind of back to the previous question on balance. What are your thoughts on kind of going super deep on one project and crushing it with that and kind of taking that further and faster versus what may seem to be splitting your focus and doing multiple kind of things at once?
I think that's a really, really good question. I've actually thought a lot about this when I've talked to many people about it. And this is where I think it really helps me to look at from brands. Mm-hmm. So when I look at a brand, like I work with some startups, I try not to, but I do work with some startups. And when there's a startup, there is legitimately only so much that can be done in a day, right? I think that when a startup has you got a really solid product page, you've got your manufacturing lined up, you've got all of this done, there's almost a certain amount that can be done before you're trying to get the results of test data that take time. I would say that if you want to be the most successful, it's to focus on one thing exclusively, period. If you want that one thing to be the most successful. But I use the term work as a vacuum because there will be diminishing returns. And I use the example like a startup for an example. And I use, if anyone who's listening is a paid media buyer, for instance, you can optimize an ad account. Let's say it takes you 2-3 hours to optimize an ad account to pristine condition. You can spend another hour and you'll probably get another 1.5%. You can spend another hour, you'll probably get another 0.5%. These are the things that if you're spending $100 million, it's worth it. Absolutely, because 1% on 100 million is $1 million. Or you're trying to get to a certain CAC number, whatever that might be. But when you look at something and say there's only so much that can be done in a certain time period, then you start to realize that one, you can probably do it a lot faster once you know it, back to decision fatigue, once you know exactly what you're supposed to do. And then two, whether it should even be you as in the person, whether it should be outsourced or whether it's really worth your time. I tell every single high performer, go get a personal assistant right now. Go get a personal assistant and give them all of the stuff you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be booking your own hotels. You shouldn't be booking your own flights. You shouldn't be doing all of the nitty gritty bullshit. You shouldn't be scheduling stuff. It shouldn't be you. And that eats up way more time than you would expect. So that's what I would say.
Final question on this piece is, how do you evaluate new opportunities that come across your desk?
I'm a lot stricter than I used to be. That's for sure. I used to say yes to everything. It was I think most entrepreneurs do this where it's they don't protect their time and they say yes to everything and then they let the gold sift out, where now I've really focused on having as many conversations as humanly possible at the top level. And then being faster at sorting out the ones that I don't think are worth time, right? Where I value myself, I value my time very highly. And unless I see, and this is a conversation going in the right direction, then I like to cut it off pretty early. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a lot of referral partners, a lot of business opportunities. Say, hey, I can't help you. Not only can I help you, I don't want to help you. And I'm just be super transparent because this doesn't make any sense for me. But I know this guy, he's amazing. I think he could help you, and sending him over that way. And they're having a goodwill structure of some kind, which is definitely worth it. That's what I would say.
Makes sense. Okay. I want to get into the digital stuff now then. So can you just talk to me about how you got involved at Weekend and what your role was and how that's kind of evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, I came on as like an employee. Like I came on as an employee, and I said, "This is what's going to happen, and I'm going to prove it inside of like 6 months, and I'm going to become a managing partner here." And that's basically exactly what happened. And I I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I made some major changes to forecasting, to EBIT evaluation, to company structure, to paid media buying in general for the good. And I definitely, pound of flesh in there to get it the way it should be. And that comes from having such an extensive agency and digital background to be able to come in and revolutionize it. And my partners are amazing there. I love them. If Tom, you ever listen to this, you're a stud. However, it's like, I think that, we both know I'm amazing at what I do and you're amazing at what you do. And it kind of just came as a connection through a connection. I got a call from another friend of mine who said, "Hey, I know some guys. I think you should talk to them. What they need is exactly what you're the best in the world at." And from there, it was history.
So when you joined, did you join the agency side of the business and then get involved with the private equity or investment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say my number one talent is forecasting and EBITDA growth, where I can look at a business and say, if we turn these four levers, this business is now worth 50% more, right? I'd say that's my number one skill. And that's where we were able to go to existing brands / investments. And I'd say, well, what are we trying to do here? And then we'd be able to shift that very quickly and make either the brand worth considerably more for a second, a double dip exit, or to be able to make it more profitable. Things that agencies, I'd say, don't think about, where I go through a P&L and say, hey, we need to cut the shipping cost. Hey, great example is if, like, for subscription brands, I know we'll talk about that in a second. If you got a subscription brand, go to all your subscribers, like right now, and find the ones that have multiple subscriptions, add an automation, which group their packages together. Congratulations, you just save 50% on your shipping cost. You're welcome. You know what I mean? Like things people don't even think about. And then now your EBITDA you're worth more from an EBITDA perspective. You're more profitable, which means you can grow faster. Things that are from an operational side that agencies don't think about, but all make a ton of sense,
Okay. So when you're looking at these investments with these kind of existing agency clients where you had all this data, you could kind of identify the levers and then you go to them with kind of the action plan and a proposal for investment.
For sure.
Okay.
Think about it like this, like investing in companies is like getting married, right? It's like a big deal. You become partners with these people. Every single relationship that I've had has started via a traditional services aspect. I want to know if these people are batshit crazy. Like when things are good, that's great. But when you hit a bump in the road, you miss a couple targets or something outside of your control happens, you need to see how people will handle themselves, right? You need to see how people will react. You need to see how they problem solve. And more than likely, you will find more often than not that you don't want to be business partners with these people. And I'm very lucky that the majority of our investments are amazing and we've done no issues. But I've also heard some horror stories out there, especially from like things that there could be hidden assets, there could be hidden debt you have no idea about. There's a lot of things there that you want to make sure you do your due diligence, not just from a fiscal perspective, but from a relationship, from an operational. Because some people might be this is common, I'd say, in more of the art space and the fashion space. Some people are really awesome to work with until you have to innovate on a new product and then the creative genius comes out. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you're almost kind of vetting them as part of the agency relationship and then you'll take it further.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there any kind of other red flags that you've seen or things that you would avoid from the agency relationship where you wouldn't take it to the next stage of kind of like investing?
I'm not, I mean, like, that's a broad question. We've got a very specific criteria. So it just depends, right? Okay. It just depends.
Can we flip that question on its head then and just say, maybe what are you looking for in these kind of opportunities?
That's a better question. I mean, I like companies that are growing. I mean, like, I like companies that are growing. I like companies that have a good product, 80% margin. The same thing, my business partner Tom loves is he loves 80% margin. I'd say he's the brains behind 99% of what we do, but good, huge margin. That's probably the number one thing. Good margin, good product, wide TAM. Those are the big three things. And not being $1 million in debt. Those are the big ones I'm after.
Okay. And then what kind of levers do you typically look to pull in these businesses? I think you mentioned there was like 4 or 5 before.
Yeah, listen, the 5 levers that anyone that you can control is you can control your AOV, you can control your CAC, you can control your returning customers, and you can control your ad spend. Those are the 4 things that I can control reasonably, whether it be through conversion rate, whether it be through email, SMS, whether it be for paid media management / creative, and whether it be product bundling and offers like this. Those are the 4 levers that you can control and ultimately own with either a net operating income positive business or a negative one. And that's pretty much it, which is why we focus so much on those subscription models now.
That's where I want to go next. So in your investments, would you only touch a subscription business now based on kind of what you said previously?
I would say, like, moving forward, I'm way more inclined. Like, if the numbers line up, then things make more sense. Sure, right? If the numbers line up, then potentially. But the reason why I love subscriptions is they are just the best. They're recession proof in a certain degree. They just give you so much time. I love traditional businesses, and if it's printing money, that's like one thing. But pretty much every business can have a subscription component. I would say that the majority of these subscriptions are caused by the majority of these subscription businesses that fail are caused by a very low understanding of your metrics and your numbers. Because realistically, if I have a business that has, let's say, 1,000 subscriptions at $100 a piece, it's like, okay, well, now I have $100,000 of expected capital every single month coming in, every single month. Counting churn, obviously, there's going to be some parts there, but even if I lose, like something massive happens, then I've got a lot of time to make decisions to scale up, scale down, and understand how to improve it or hurt it. Where now, if I'm acquiring a customer, let's talk from CAC, because that's probably the biggest thing. Customer acquisition cost is not going to get cheaper. It's only going to get more expensive. And as I look into 2026 and the rest of 2025, I want the highest lifetime value as possible. And that only comes from a subscription component or from a very high, like, consumable component that they're going to continue to eat a chunk of and eat a chunk of.
For sure. Can you just talk to some of the brands that you've seen that are maybe a bit funky in terms of what they sell on subscription? So obviously, everyone knows of skincare, toothpaste, whatever, consumable items. What else can people do if they're not in that kind of space?
I'm going to give you 2 examples of ones. I'm going to give you the OG Pier 1 imports. I'd say OG Pier 1 was the king and queen of subscription. It's something, I think it was like Pier 1 Club or something. I forget what it was called, and I think they still do this, where every product on their website is on sale. You go there right now, like every product on their website's on sale. It's like 20% off, 30% off, free shipping. The only way to get it is if you're part of their Pier 1 Club, which is, I think it's just a microtransaction. It's like $6 a month. You're buying hundreds of dollars of furniture, right? And then you're going to spend $6 on a monthly subscription. And that is, like, if you have a traditional business, that's the easiest way of doing it. Adding some kind of VIP club, something kind of that, your apparel, it's like a really good way of doing it. So that's like a funky way of doing it. Now, another way, which as Barbell Apparel, if you guys listen to this, you guys are killer. They do a great job with this. They have it's similar, but they give them credit every month. So it's a heavier subscription. It's not a microtransaction. I think it's like $20 or $25 a month. And they give them in-store credit every month of the same value, if not more. So if you spend $20 a month on subscription, you get like $30 of in-store credit. And it's like, okay, hold on. Plus, like, priority shipping, plus, like, VIP customer service, early access to drops, free returns, all of these bullet points that come with it. And then you get in-store credit every month. So it's almost like they're guaranteeing themselves purchases by giving people this in-store credit, which, I would guess that, like, gift cards have nearly a 50% utilization rate. I don't know what their numbers are, but I guess it's probably not 100% utilization of that in-store credit. There's probably a couple of accounts in there sitting with probably $1,000 of in-store credit just, sitting. But those are some of the ones that, if you're not like a consumable brand, how it can be used,
For sure. And I know when we spoke previously, you said something that I didn't quite understand at the time anyway. Subscription offers help with acquisition and kind of acquiring customers on the front end. Can you
Yeah.
talk me through that? Because my mindset, retention, it's just LTV subscriptions, right? So like, how does it help on the front end?
Yeah, so I think that this comes down back to what I just said with the offer. So imagine you're going to buy, even if this is a consumable, let's imagine it is a consumable. So let's say it's a subscription versus not, and they're the same price here. So first thing is, if you have a consumable brand, everyone does the same thing. Oh, I'm going to give subscription at 15% off. Do not do that. What you need to do is you need to raise your one-time purchase price by 15%. Do not lower your subscription price. Raise your one-time purchase price. You want to make the one-time purchase hard while making the subscription easy. So a good example of this is doing all of these things. Hey, if you're on our subscription, you get early access to new product releases. That's like the easiest one of a consumable. Let's say you're a drink, your makeup, your whatever, any kind of consumable, you have a new product release. Congratulations. If you're on subscription, you're now a VIP, which means you get access a day earlier, 7 days earlier, whatever you want to do it. That's the easiest way. Then acquisition, you can also give all of these other things like the free customer support, the returns and exchanges, all of these, I call it the VIP club benefits that you get for being a subscriber that actually can make your customer acquisition cost go down or stay the same. But if you set up the offer correctly, it should go down, which now you've increased your LTV substantially. You've decreased your cost per acquiring a customer, and you've made yourself a much healthier business because from a valuation standpoint, from like EBITDA, like in getting the most out of your company, great thing about a subscription company is if you wanted to, you could pause all your advertising for a month or two and just rake in crazy cash and then either buy equipment, become really profitable, take that to a possible full acquisition partner, and they'd be super happy with it.
Okay. Playing devil's advocate, what would you say to someone that would be kind of too scared to do what you just said? And it would just say, if I increase the price of my one-time offer, that's going to impact conversion rates. Some people don't want to be tied into a subscription and it's going to harm my business.
I hear that so many times. That is literally the number one first thing I always hear. I even tell people make subscription. This is Grayson #Grayson's hot take. Make subscription the default option because most people have it on the page like, oh, we're afraid. Make it the default. And the way I would respond to that is do it, test it. There are always going to be unknown unknowns. You want as many unknown knowns as possible. So, IntelliGems is like, I don't know, $100 a month, $79 a month, something like that. Super cheap. A/B test it. Prove me wrong. If you prove me wrong, send me a screenshot. I'll say I'm wrong, but I have not been wrong to date of anyone who's implemented it correctly. That your LTV will be considerably higher, and it will, even if your customer acquisition cost goes up, the LTV will be much higher than the difference in CAC. So, and I've not been wrong on this period. So do it. Prove me wrong. I'd love to see it. You know.
I like the confidence. On this point, if you've got like an existing brand that you're maybe having this conversation with, how do you recommend they kind of launch a subscription? Is it to new customers? Is it to use their old list? Or yeah, what would you say to methods of launching this?
Yeah, definitely to new customers. So, our goal is to get first-time customers to come back. So I recommend Skio, not just because I love them, but because they have an amazing software. And it's light years ahead of what Recharge, like their product roadmap is basically, what Recharge's product roadmap will be next year. So I love them and they do great work. But the easiest way of doing it is get it on your product pages, make it an option, soft launch like that, see what happens. My favorite subscription offer is instead of doing a 20% off sale, which is pretty common, do 30% off your first month of the subscription, just the first month. And then you'll get a crazy high take rate. You'll get a lot of people come through, and very quickly you'll fill up that subscriber bucket, and you'll learn a lot from your cohort data to find out really quickly, is it worth it or is it not? And then you can do the same thing to returning customers. Don't do it to active returning customers because they're already buying your stuff. You don't want to give them a discount. So go to the customers who have not bought in a while, segment that in Klaviyo, and push over to those customers.
I want to talk now about platforms. You mentioned kind of Skio and why it was the best, I think, due to roadmap. Are there any other kind of reasons why? And yeah, how do you see maybe the cons or yeah, the downsides of going with some of the other players on the market?
I mean, they're all at the end of the day, it's just a software. Like if we want something that's like it's just a software, it charges people every month. I mean, it's not like a complicated software. Recharge is great. Like I know I kind of joke about it. Recharge is great. Bold subscriptions is great. I tell people to use Skio just because it's really, I don't want to say it's cheap, but they put more on the fixed cost versus you can get, once you get up there, you'll save a lot of money. And they also have the best integrations from what I've seen with like email and SMS services with Facebook to be able to build really good segmentation. They also have some platforms that work really well for win back, like cancellation, swap your product instead of canceling. And that's why I think Skio is a total killer. The other softwares have this, but the customer service aspect, I think we all have the thing. I just want to talk to somebody when I'm having a problem. And I think
Yeah.
Skio is like one of the few places that actually offers that,
Okay.
where if you have a problem, they can help you.
Okay. You touched on it there. Can we just talk to some of the messaging around the subscription offer that you've maybe just launched for a brand? And I
Yeah.
guess here, we've already talked about how to launch it, but maybe some more on that. Maybe, how do we address churn? How do we try and get ahead
Yeah.
of that
You're getting
mispayment?
me so excited. You're getting me so excited, Jordan. Like, this is the stuff I love about. So there's three things. I'm gonna warn it. Here are your three things that are gonna happen, everybody. When you put subscription in your business, number one thing that's gonna happen. People are gonna complain. Be ready. I'm just just warning you. They're gonna complain. I've actually got this happen so much because we'll launch subscription, you'll get 4 messages to customer service, and people will think the world is exploding, right? They'll say, I never signed up for the subscription. It's okay. Like, this happens. It's just part of what we do.
So
Now,
this
so
is
be
people that
prepared
have
for that.
opted in but think they haven't, or is that another?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, there's going to be misclicks that happen. If you make it default, people are not going to be paying attention. There's going to be lots of things that happen. But the reality is, if you're going from 0 complaints, let's say 1 complaint to 5 complaints, you're going to say it's a 500% increase in complaints, but it's 5 people, right? Depending on your scale, whatever that looks like, it's 5 people. So customer feedback is super important, but take it with a grain of salt and then look at the numbers and make your decisions unemotionally. Make them off of what's best for your customer, but also make them off of what's really, really important for the business. And more often than not, what you'll find out is, yes, you may have a couple of customer complaints, but overall, the way of expressing customer sentiment is lifetime value. If lifetime value is up, your customers are happy. Like, that's the direct correlation. And you'll have a way higher LTV. So the way that you introduce this, let's say, and this is, I'm going to do this with a brand in the next couple of weeks, and I'll give you an example how we're going to do it. Number one step, product page. Add it as the default option to the product page. Again, test this. We're going to do it with intelligence. Default option on the product page. Raise the one-time price by 15%. Make the subscription option come with all of these benefits, which cost you nothing, and make that the number one thing. So that's the first thing. Launch that, and then make sure you tag all of those customers inside of your Shopify backend so you can track that individual cohort of LTV. Super important here. Next, the next thing you're going to test is you're actually going to run an offer. You're going to run that first month is X% off, and you're going to tag all those customers. And what you're going to probably see is you're probably going to see that those customers are probably worth a little bit less because you just lowered the barrier to entry, worth less from an LTV perspective. But did the CAC, customer acquisition cost, get low enough that it made it better in the right direction? Like, as in, did you drop your CAC by $20, but you have $10 less LTV? Totally worth it then. Did you drop your CAC by $10 and you have $30 less LTV? Not worth it. And when I say LTV, I'm talking like a 12-month period. I know that we can go lifetime, but I'm talking like a 12-month period here. So the goal is to launch it, get it live, get some data in, and then immediately, as soon as you can, run the second test so you can start getting long tail cohorts. The problem with subscription is that anything you do, unlike a direct response offer, anything you do, you will not know for certain until those cohorts have ran their cycle. So I can run a test and I can say, okay, this is how month 1 was, but I can model it off of historical performance, but we'll have no idea how month 2, month 3, month 4, and month 5 actually is until that time passes. So your goal, if you want to just absolutely kill it with your subscription offer, your goal is to generate positive contribution margin inside of a 90-day window. And I know that's controversial. Most people say, oh, I want to be first order profitable. But 90-day window allows you to scale to the maximum as possible. It's where you'll get the most likely line of credit from a manufacturer, from Amex Plum, from Ramp, from all these companies, where you'll be paying like less than 5% for 90-day terms, and you can probably scale your business 10x faster. So that was kind of like Grayson's implementation process,
It's very actionable. That second step where you say you're launching that kind of 30% off, is that to existing customers or is that to kind of new people on the front end?
So absolutely both. So
Okay.
run it on the front end, run it on your product page, and then you'll be able to run those numbers to say, hey, how much is this returning customer cohort worth, whether they had the subscription or not? And then how much is the first time customer cohort worth, whether they had a subscription or not? Because what you
Okay.
want to be, and this is why I tell people to raise their price instead of offering 15% off, because what a lot of businesses will do is they'll just say, okay, 15% off if you have a subscription. And then they'll look at all of their returning customer cohorts, and everyone who would have bought the product anyway just comes back and buys it now that you just lowered all of your margins by 15%, which sucks. So that's why it's important to make sure that, the people you're impacting are going to be those first time customers.
Got it. Okay. What would you say to someone that, again, is playing devil's advocate here? Someone that says they don't, or they're nervous about doing this because they don't know about the data. They don't know how long to expect people to stay in the subscription. And after
Yeah.
3 months, maybe they've got some data in. What do we know? Like, how do we know what the benchmarks are?
Yeah, I mean, start with what you know to be true. I think that that's like the reality is if you're a business, you have LTV data, unless you're like a brand new startup, right?
Hmm.
If you're a brand new startup, you should skip all of the hard part and just go subscription off the bat and then make that your baseline. But you have data. Like a lot of people, a lot of the conversations I have, I'm blown away because I am a certified freak in the sheets, as in Google Sheets. But it blows me away how much people don't know about their LTV data. I'm like, how are you even in business?
Yeah.
But you have this data. Use that as your baseline and say, well, for me to be profitable, I need to increase it by X, and let this be your experiment. Use Lifetimely, use Statless, use whatever. Get your LTV data of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and say, for me to be profitable, I need to increase the LTV by this percentage. Then start your test and then get your months of cohort data. First month, you'll say it went up or it went down. If it went up, which I'm hope it probably does, if it went up, then you'll say, great, I just got 5% closer to my goal out of 10%. Second month, it's probably going to get you a little bit closer. And the answer is that this is going to be a calculated risk, the same way launching something new in your ad account is a calculated risk, but it's almost always worth it.
Okay. Now let's assume we've kind of, we've got those LTV goals. We've launched subscription. We're getting closer to that LTV goal, but we're not quite there. We're now kind of trying to look at, the churn and decrease that. How would you deal with that or address that problem?
So churn is like interesting. Churn is probably the thing I think most customers deal with. So number one, back to why I said Scale is killer, because they have like these, offer people the ability to pause their subscription, swap it for another product, or have like, hey, stay for 1 month and we'll stay for another month and we'll give you 20% off. And then, because it's better to get a 20% off versus nothing. So first have those cancellation flows. Um, Second, there's another way of offering tier discounts for the longer you're on. So say you get to 6 months and you get 10% off. Say you get to a year, you get 20% off. Those are good ways. But it usually comes down to the product itself. And the number one reason for churn I see reported inside of our brands and I see inside of other brands is I have too much of the product. Usually the number one way. Whether, and this is self-reported, so whether that to be true or not is up to discussion, but that's usually self-reported. And it says, okay, well, that means we're sending them too much, right? And this is where things start to make sense from an LTV perspective, where you need to be able to offer that ability to pause, which will just solve you for right there instead of canceling. But to really take a hard look at your serving and your sample sizes, where it's like, hey, do they really need this much of XYZ product? Is this, especially when we talk about like moisturizer, skincare, obviously people are going to use more moisturizers in wintertime than they're going to use in summer because they're inside. There's heaters / air conditioners, which are going to remove moisture out of the air, say, depending on the climate where they are. But to be really, really in the line of what's causing your churn from a product standpoint. From a digital side, it usually comes down to like the pricing, the piece of this. And like I've talked about pricing a lot to brands. And I'll give you like an anecdotal example. If I have a $50 product, I would rather give it to somebody, and let's say we have $10, $20 cost of goods. I'd rather give it to somebody for $40 or $35 and know that they're going to stay around for a year versus giving it to them for $50 and know that they're only going to stick around for 3 months. And pricing plays a huge part of this, which is why you should do LTV price tests to find out how long people are going to stick around. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself the question, do I want the most value inside of that 90-day mark? Or am I good with getting more value over a longer period? Would I rather get, let's say, per customer, $200 of profit over 12 months? Or would I rather get $100 of profit over 90 days, but then there's nothing after that? You
And
know?
that depends on the funding situation of the brand, right?
It depends on the funding situation, your goals. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Are you trying to sell this as a lifestyle brand? Because personally, if you're in super growth mode, I'd rather have the $100 inside of 90 days because then I can
Mhm.
grow way faster. However, if I ever hit a back to like the stability side, as we are all experiencing the super tariffs right now, the stability side, that, okay, I've got 90 days of LTV, and then after that it's useless. So now it's like, if something happens, if I run out of product, if I'm affected, might get a shipment that's lost, if my ads stop working, if anything happens, then I'm kind of up shit's creek without a paddle. So
Yeah.
it's like, short-term investing versus long-term investing.
Okay. Back to the kind of churn point, how do you address that in your messaging? And are you using kind of email, SMS, etc. to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it becomes an education cycle and lifestyle cycle. When somebody's got the product, products are commoditized. I'm like, everyone's going to say, well, I've got the best product in the world, right? That's what they're going to say. The same way that we hear a lot of agency folks say, I have the best agency in the entire world, which, they probably do one thing better than anyone else. But you could have the best product in the world, but you need to sell the brand. Retention, once they've purchased and they're on a subscription, is a very different thing than retention when they're not on a subscription. When they're on a subscription, your goal is to keep them in love with the brand and the mission as much as possible. And that's it. When they're not on a subscription, it is to get them to be in love with the brand and the mission as much as possible, comma, also, here's our shop now, click to action, go buy another product. You know what I mean? Because you actually have to still sell them something if they're not on the subscription versus when they are, when your only goal is to keep them on the product subscription. So it's a very different game. And this might sound weird, but I've seen some brands where they don't even send them emails or texts because they're like, as long as we don't talk to them, they've ran tests where it's like, we don't talk to them at all and they stay on the product. If we send them SMS and we send them emails, then it's top of mind, and then they're thinking about, oh, do I really need this? But it's testing, and for me, I found the most success from selling on the brand, keeping them in love with the product, the mission. If you're involved with charities, if you're involved with XYZ, this is where you can really come in and lower that churn by showing how bad everyone else is and how good you are. Like you can send them the headline that's like, oh my gosh, did you see competitor X's was just being sued because there's lead in their stuff? Don't actually do that, but like an example.
No, I get you. So you've actually kind of taken my next question off my plate, which was we have some clients who tell us to take all subscribers out of all email campaigns and flows because they do not want to message them to remind them that they're on subscription.
No way.
So
That's so
you've
funny.
covered that one. What I was going to say to that point though, of like focusing on brand and kind of going heavy on that stuff, are you as a footnote in those campaigns saying like, if you've got too much stuff, pause here, or kind of messaging to that effect?
Yeah, I think so. I think that where we've from an email SMS standpoint, we've kind of stayed away from that because since it's part of the cancellation process, right? Where we make it so when someone has to cancel, they have to click the button. Well, why are you canceling, right? And then we'll see how this, just so everyone's aware who's listening. So if you have a subscription brand, that might change due to the one click opt in, one click opt out type of legislation that's happening. That might change, but as of right now, they have to give a reason and say, "Well, I have too much." It says, "Oh, you have too much? Well, why don't we just pause?" And then if you pause this month, not only are we going to pause you, we're going to, and then we have our downsell series. Not only are we going to pause you, and they say, well, I don't want that. Like, well, what if we pause you and we give you 50% off and we give you $20 in store credit? And they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll stick around then.
No, I like that. One question I did have on this is, so we worked with like a UK food delivery company. They had a phone sales team and they cold dialed, or I guess it's warm dialed, but everyone that churned, they rang them up. Do you do any kind of approaches like that that's not automated after the kind of churn?
Jordan, I love that you just said that. I'm going to tell you two quick stories. And so this goes to just upselling too. So you can, thank God for AI, but we can we can automate that now. We can automate these phone calls. But one of our best upsell series of all times was, we had a voicemail that would drop to customers. Hey,
Well,
Drop Cowboy, if you're listening to this, killer software. We had a voicemail that would drop to customers right after they bought a product. It was a rug, and the rug had a cleaning solution that would go with it. That was the upsell. And if people didn't take it, this is the voicemail they would get. It would say, hey James, I'm just packing up your order right here. I'm the CEO of the company. I saw it came through. I noticed that you didn't get this cleaning solution. I'd really recommend you should get it. I know it's $20 on our site. If you go, here's a code I'd made just for you. It'll give it to you for $15, and I'll just throw it in the same package, so you don't have to even pay for shipping. But you have to order it in the next 24 hours, or because I'm going to ship this out, so it's got to go in the same box. Anyway, I really appreciate your business. You're a first time customer. Thank you. Bye. Hang up. and it was an automated voicemail, and it was one of our best upsells of all time. It was like crazy take rate, right?
Mhm.
And when we talk about subscription, we really started racking our brain about this, especially to some of these brands. And I'm like, well, we've got some subscribers churning. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what's the LTV value if they stick around? I'm like, well, over 12 months, it's like $200. And I'm like, okay, so what would it cost to get somebody on the phones? And like, well, what do you pay customer service? 15, $20 an hour. I'm like, okay, so how many people do you think they could call an hour? They're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, probably 60. I bet they could get a call a minute, because a lot of people are going to be not answering. So it's a call. And by the way, this is so crazy. If any of you guys, anyone listening, just a hack, if you're using a CRM that can send or receive text messages for your customer service, have them send a text right before they call that says, hey, I'm this person. I'm from this company. I'm going to give you a call in a second. Because when they call, if they're on an iPhone, it will display their name. It'll display this name
Wow.
from this company, because Apple Intelligence will read the text message and then display it on the phone, which they're way more likely to answer. And then call twice, because every time if it's they have do not disturb on, it won't do it. So call twice. But anyway, yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, well, if I'm paying somebody $20 an hour
Yeah.
and they're dialing phones, and if they call, let's say, even 30 people an hour and they get one person to save, then they just pay that through that they just pay their entire salary, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's people get so afraid of me when I say, let's do it. Like literally make that a process in customer service. Like, oh, it sounds so hard. I'm like, yes, it is. Just go do it though.
Do things that don't scale, right?
Oh my God. You do unsexy things so you can do sexy things later,
Yeah. Just on that point, do you do any other kind of methods or strategies to kind of reactivate churned people after the fact?
Yeah, I love Gary Vee. I don't feel like we talk about how Gary Vaynerchuk is like one of the funniest slash perfect example of do things that do not scale, right? And go to your top 10. I say top 100, but if you're a small brand, go to your top 10 LTV customers and call them and send them not only like a $50, like a five, if they're a big customer, like a $500 gift card to them, call them, thank them, send them a $500 gift card for themselves, and then send them like 10 $50 gift cards to give to their friends. And because those people, like Taylor Holiday talked about the super sneezers, these
Yeah.
are the people that tell every single person about your brand and will be your best brand ambassador ever. And I say, do you want to know? And they're like, well, how much, what gift card should I give them? I'm say, tell me what your customer acquisition cost is. And they're like, $50, $50 gift card, because that's what you would pay to acquire a customer otherwise. Um, and it's just such a good way of getting it done quickly, you know?
Are you on that point? Are you doing anything to kind of get people to spread the word? So any subscriber referral schemes or anything like that?
Yeah, referrals are hard to scale. I mean, in my opinion, referrals are hard to scale. I think that practice I just talked about is something we actively do. Like that is probably one of the most scalable ones. Is that reward your best customers because they will tell everyone about it. And then obviously we use lots of use whatever loyalty slash referral softwares which are highly rated in Shopify. But that's definitely not one of my core competencies. Outside
Yeah.
of like the affiliate side, which is really popular on TikTok Shop right now.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about kind of subscription program best practices. How would you kind of make some of these changes to a subscription program that's already up and running?
Yeah, that's actually, if you told me who is my ideal brand to go work with right now, and like it would be a brand that has a subscription component.
Why?
Oh my gosh, because it's just so unoptimized. It's just like almost
Okay.
always so unoptimized. And it's like you already did all the groundwork. It's like you built the cake, you made the frosting, and you didn't slice it. And like that's where I always feel that when I look at it, because I'll go in here and say, hey, you've got 5 products and one of them has a way higher lifetime value. Why are you pushing these 3? And like, well, we don't know. It's like we don't know. Or it's just like those churn prevention techniques, or it's or having it checked by default. I have a brand that like we just random I did an audit for like 6-7 months ago, and like the biggest thing is like they have physical locations, and I'm going to help them with some other stuff, but they have physical locations and they're really big on digital. I said, I want you to go change your button to be checked by default and just trust me on this. Just trust me. They tested it, increased their LTV by like 600%. And it was like a no-brainer for me, but they brought the same things that I brought up earlier. Is they said, well, we tested it for a couple days and we only ran it for a couple days because we got a bunch of customer service complaints. I'm like, well, how many did you go from and how many did you go to? And they said, well, I don't remember, but I remember customer service being really upset. And we went back and looked at the data. They went from 3 complaints to 9 complaints. And customer service just reports, oh my gosh, it's a 300% increase in complaints, right? But it's like 6 people, you know?
Okay. While you were talking there, you just reminded me of something else, and that was kind of taking it back to launching a new subscription program. Would you start with one product, or would you start with kind of multiple products on that subscription?
If you've got multiple products, put it on all of them. You know, you want as much data as fast as possible. And most businesses, their top 3 SKUs make up 80% of their revenue. So it's like if you're really cautious about it and you really want to feel safe about it, do it on your third most popular SKU. Right. That's what I
Okay.
would tell people to do. If you're really cautious about it, as long as it's not like an accessory to number one, you know what I mean? That's the best way I would say to do it. Is test on your third SKU, get confident in it, get your feet wet, and then come over there. You know.
Okay. Final question on subscription. Do you think there's like anything that I've missed that you would like to talk about, or yeah, kind of any high value stuff that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this isn't even like a miss. It's just probably like a summary of this. Get really down and dirty with your data. Like I know that this sound as a marketer, you probably hear this all the time. Everyone hears this. We talk about the data, the data, the data, and it's became basically a buzzword at this point. But make a list of the stuff that's actually important and monitor that and nothing else. Because there's a wall of a million things you could possibly be looking at, but the reality is the only thing that matters is contribution margin and LTV, and then everything else is a breakdown of, and CAC, obviously customer acquisition cost. But I think in summary, when we talk about subscriptions, is that if you've got a business that has a product that's consumable in any way, shape, or form, or even a business that has durable goods that you could sell as a subscription with a microtransaction of like 199 to 299, you probably should do it. And I mean that because it's an absolute no brainer for me that I would do it in every
Yeah.
single business. The list of businesses that I've seen a subscription not work in, and the only time I haven't seen it work is when it either implemented poorly or it's a subscription case where the CAC got so high that it didn't make up for the difference in LTV, but that was due to like just bad offer and standpoint, and it just didn't make sense. So if you have a business
Okay.
that's subscription, test it. You know, and I've got some great relationships over there. You can tell them that I sent you over, and they'll probably give you a couple 6-month discount or something like that. They'll help you out.
Nice. So I think that's the big takeaway, isn't it? Like any business, pretty much you can do a subscription with and go on over to Skio and start following some of the advice we just talked about.
Yes, I mean, like our struggle, and this is like I feel like the anxiety back to like the work life balance factor, right? The anxiety
Hmm.
factor that you will have as a founder to know that if the worst case scenario happens, shit hits the fan, you got to turn all of your ads off. That you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of reoccurring revenue coming in.
Hmm.
That you'll probably feel a lot better. You'll feel a lot better. You'll sleep better at night. You'll be able to make better decisions. It is very difficult to make decisions in a business. I know a lot of both agencies and a lot of businesses are going to experience that this year because it's the way that the economics are moving. Um,
Yeah.
you're going to experience a lot of financial discipline and a lot of financial stress. Give yourself one less thing to not worry about, right?
Hmm.
And don't waste your time, energy, and effort to doing something that's not worth it. You know?
Okay. Grayson, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. I guess final couple of questions. First off, if people want to kind of follow along with you, where's the best place to find you and where can they do that?
Well, I'm an Instagram guy. I hate to say it, but I love Instagram so much. I'm LinkedIn is like the other one. Like I worked really hard on my LinkedIn last year. If you want to like have fun and hang out with me, Instagram's the place to go. If you want to like have some really valuable knowledge, I try to post almost every day on LinkedIn on just like actual case studies. This is what's going on. This is how I would fix it. Lots of templates, lots of examples. That's where I'd recommend going if you want to do it. So Grayson Cross, LinkedIn/work harder. That was a hard thing to get, by the way. That was super hard to get, by the way. And
Have you got that handle on Instagram as well, or is
no,
that
I,
different?
I got the blue check mark, Grayson Cross official, unfortunately. And then I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Where can people find you? And I think you've covered that, right?
Nice.
Instagram for fun and LinkedIn. And you do a lot of subscription info, right, on
Absolutely.
LinkedIn.
Just like data. Like I'm all about LTV, about data. It's like if you want to, I'm recently, again, a lot of AI stuff too, about how to not work as hard and get as much data back into it. And we're at the point where it's like you can throw an entire spreadsheet and ask ChatGPT, is like, hey, what's the answer to my question? And it'll get it to you pretty accurately.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Grayson, thanks again. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been a good chat.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.